Hi, it's Jan Beta, and in the last episode I did not only fail to do the RGB to HDMI mod correctly in my Amiga 600, but I also managed to mispronounce Joachim's name, who's actually pronounced Joachim and not Joachim, as is the Northern German pronunciation. I'm sorry about that. I didn't know, frankly. So in this episode, I'm going to try to right the wrongs and finish the RGB to HDMI mod. And because that's probably, hopefully, going to be a very short video, I'm also going to make an EPROM with Kickstart 3.2, which actually just came out. There is actually an update to AmigaOS, and it's version 3.2. Released by Hyperion Entertainment recently, and I'm going to go through the steps of burning an EPROM with that on it and putting it into the A600, and then probably going to tinker a bit with the system and look at some of the new features, which are pretty amazing. The fact that there's a new version of AmigaOS in itself is pretty amazing, of course, but there's also a bunch of new features that have been added that are really useful for modern old school Amiga systems, so with larger hard disk partitions and things like that, and faster processors, and there's a number of things that are much easier in the new version. So we're going to take a look at that. But first of all, let's look at the failed RGB to HDMI mod and do that properly. So here's where I failed the last time. I put this neat little adapter circuit board on the Denise, which is a PLCC Denise chip in the Amiga 600 that Joachim and Klaus designed, and added the little RGB to HDMI board. You can't see it because the Raspberry Pi is on top. If you haven't watched the previous episode, I'm not going to talk about this stuff in detail in this one. Please check out the previous episode where I explain a bit about the RGB to HDMI mod. I'm going to put links to all of this in the description if you want to read up on that rather. So yeah, basically the part where I failed is this is meant to have an HDMI output through the Raspberry Pi, and this adds a really elegant way of putting that into your Amiga. And yeah, basically you put this mini HDMI small circuit board in here, then there's a flat flex running to another little circuit board with a regular size HDMI socket that can be put on this little plate that Joachim made out of acrylic, and then this end of the flat flex should plug in this little circuit board here, and you have an HDMI socket on the back side of the Amiga. But I broke the little retaining clip on the HDMI PCB. So yeah, I ordered a new one, and I also ordered new flat flexes from Barry Base as the parts that were previously provided, and I'm going to put this one in here. So here's the new part. I already threw the old one away that I broke. I managed to get it off the little acrylic plate by applying some force and I totally bent the HDMI connector on it now. So that's completely useless, unfortunately. This little retaining clip here, the black part that I'm just pulling out, is what I broke last time, and that's obviously for pushing the cable against the contacts. Actually, in the last video I also managed to put the cable in the wrong direction at first. I tried it in the other direction later off camera and it didn't work still, so I definitely broke this clip, and that's why this didn't work. You want to insert it in a way that the contacts are facing upwards, because the retainer is pushing the contacts from the backside to contact the top contacts in this connector. So that's the way it should be inserted here. I'm going to add some double-sided foamy adhesive to the backside as well to fit it on the acrylic plate and hopefully mount it permanently in the case. As I said, yeah, the black part should be pushing on the contacts from the backside. So this is the side with the mini HDMI. I always want to say RGB, but it's not RGB, it's HDMI. The contacts are facing upwards. And on this one, same thing. Pull out the little black retaining clip and then push it in there with the contacts facing us, the viewer. There we go. That should do it. I'm going to try this without fixing it to the acrylic yet. Just going to plug this in like so and try if we actually get an output. Okay, I have everything connected up, connected the HDMI cable directly to the TV actually, and going to turn this Amiga on. Yes, we get an output signal. Yeah, and it's an Amiga 50 Hz profile output, and as you can see, it works beautifully. We already determined that this mod works flawlessly through the direct connection to the Raspberry Pi, but yeah, of course it's more elegant. So we can now put the little HDMI PCB into the acrylic plate in the circuit board and we're going to be good. Yeah, now obviously this is a very elegant way of doing this, in case you don't break the flat flex or anything. Actually, a number of people asked if you can put an accelerator card in here with this mod installed, and Joachim confirmed in the video comments that it's actually possible at least to put a Furia accelerator, which is like the common and I think best way of getting an accelerator into the A600. It's totally possible to fit it in here because this circuit board is really flat and the Furia just sits above it. Another question is thermals. You can see that there's a little hole here for some airflow, I guess. I think thermals are not a big issue because this is actually the chip gets warm in the center where the die is, and yeah, pretty much this should be enough to ventilate the chip. Also, the circuit board has a copper layer, I believe, so it should heat up quite nicely and get some heat away from the actual chip. So I don't know if that's gonna be an issue. I had this running for a couple of hours and I didn't run into any issues. So I think we are good on the thermal side. Even that's, yeah, it is a legit concern, I think, because these chips run rather warm, but usually in these Amigas the chips are not getting very hot or anything like that. It's gonna be fine, I guess. So yeah, now we have the HDMI mod nicely in place there. Let's install a new Kickstart and a new Workbench on here. If you plan on making your own RGB to HDMI circuit board, I recommend checking out the sponsor for this video, which is of course PCBWay, my favorite prototype PCB manufacturer, and they offer excellent service and fast turnaround times for very reasonable prices. So it's a good address to check out for making small batches of circuit boards like these. And they can also populate your surface mount parts for you. Back to the video. Okay, now that I got this thing working, I want to take a look at AmigaOS 3.2 and install it in this Amiga 600 to see how well it actually runs in this system that doesn't have an accelerator and has very little RAM. This just has 1 megabyte, but this should still work. It probably performs a lot better on accelerated systems and higher level models, but yeah, I'm just curious to see this, and I'm going to show how to burn an EPROM with the Kickstart ROM on it and then go through the installation process of this and check out some of the new features. Yeah, as you can see, this has this rather crude Kickstart switcher in it with a 1.3 ROM and a burned EPROM with Kickstart 3.1 on there. This actually says A500 on it, but it's the same version of the ROM that runs in the A600 too. So I'm going to pull this and put a new one in that I'm going to make in a second. And in order to burn the Kickstart ROM, I'm using my Mini Pro TL866 programmer. These are still available in an upgraded version, TL866-2, I think. And I'm using an AMD AM27C400 EPROM. These should be the correct size, I think 512 kilobytes for the ROM we are using here. And this is a 120 version, which is the access time actually. So you need 120 or faster versions of this, I think, in the Amigas. So yeah, this should work fine. I got these chips off eBay. I'm not sure if they are legit, so we're going to find out in a second. However, this just fits this socket, but actually the Mini Pro can't burn these out of the box, so you need an adapter. I got one of these. This is an adapter that allows you to burn larger EPROMs than the TL866 can do out of the box by just programming portions of it at a time. For the 27C400, we don't really need to program things different banks at a time. We can just program it in one go if we set the software to 27C4096. This is a design by Keir Fraser, who also makes the Amiga diagnostics disc that I've shown in several videos now, I think. And yeah, this should allow me to program these EPROMs. It's been a while since I've done that, but it already worked for me. I programmed several diagrams and things like that for the Amiga, so it should work, hopefully. So putting this EPROM in here, like so. Yeah, this should be the way it goes. You have to align it with the bottom of the socket here. And in order to program it, I'm going to use my trusty VirtualBox installation of Windows XP just for giggles. This system runs macOS really, but I'm using a Windows virtual machine to do this, which has worked fine for me in the past, and I like to have like a separate system for EPROM programming on here. The software works also in Windows 10 and other versions of Windows, and there's also a command line tool for macOS and several Linuxes, so you can use different software and have it work on another system. I'm using Windows XP. On the CD you find different versions of the Kickstart ROM for different systems, and there's always a binary file that is the one you want to use for burning it to an EPROM directly, and there's also a ROM file with the ROM suffix that you can use in an emulator. We are going to use the binary file, obviously, and yeah, we are going to use the AM27C4096 setting for this. Select. And then we are going to open the file. This is the one we need for the 600 Kick CD-TV. This is for the Amiga 1000, for the 500, for the 2000, and for the 600, and for the CD-TV, obviously. So this is the binary version. I'm going to open it and should just work. Yeah, and it says Amiga ROM. Yeah. And it fits the EPROM. So all we have to do now is to hit program, basically. I'm doing a blank check before, if our EPROM is blank. ID error! Don't think these EPROMs have an ID check, but we're going to see. Blank check. Yeah, now it works. The ID check was only introduced for more modern EPROMs, I think. And most EEPROMs have them, but this is like a UV erasable old school EPROM. And most of those don't have a device ID that you can check, so you have to uncheck the check ID mark here. And now we should be able to just program it. I hope. Let's see. It should be blank. Everything is in order. Let's try. Okay, program. And this actually takes a while. But it seems to work. That's quite nice. Nearly there. It's verifying. And yeah, it says programming successful. So we should have a Kickstart 3.2 ROM here. And obviously I'm going to put it in the socket in the correct orientation. By the way, you don't have to worry about the data getting corrupted even if the little UV erase window is exposed. It literally takes days to corrupt the data even in direct sunlight. That's why you use pretty high-powered UV lamps to erase these. I am going to put a label on there to protect it, but I'm not too worried about this getting corrupted by just having it exposed to sunlight at this point. So yeah, let's see if this actually works. Yeah, and probably this is not going to boot up my 3.1 Workbench that I have installed on my little SD card here, but we should still be able to see if this works generally. Okay, yeah, and there we can see that the ROM works. We just have these newer versions of the ROM starting with 3.1.4 are missing some of the libraries that were integrated in the ROM with previous versions. So you can't really boot older Workbench versions with these ROMs. But we got a boot up screen and yeah, this means the ROM works. That's good. So yeah, next step is going to be installing a 3.2 Workbench on here. The easiest way to do this I could come up with is by using my Go tag that I made a whole video about. I updated this to the flash floppy firmware and I put the ADF files that are also provided on the CD for several systems on here. So we're going to be able to use this instead of the original disk drive. You could of course make disk images and use real-life floppy disks, but I'm just going to use the Go tag and the USB stick with the files on it. So we should have power on this, I hope. Yep. And I have all the ADF files on here. And of course, we're going with install. And we're going to reset the Amiga. So yeah, this is quite a messy way of doing this. I temporarily hooked up the keyboard again, but yeah, we're going to get there. I am going to power this on and this should power on. Yep. And I have the install disk inserted here, so it should boot up. Probably, maybe we're getting somewhere. Yeah, and as you can see, we have booted up our installation disk. And yeah, this says 2021 Hyperion Entertainment CBBA. This is the 2021 version of AmigaOS. Who would have thought? Okay, I think we should format the SD card before doing anything else. And this actually has some pretty nice features added to it. It's much easier to do this. You don't have to fiddle with the max transfer rate and things like that if you're using a standard Amiga hard disk controller, and many third-party controllers also should work. Yeah, high-speed SD. It even recognizes that there's an SD card adapter in here. That's pretty cool. Oh, okay. I think we just have to format this because it already has a partition on it and is configured. So I'm just going to format the Workbench partition here. Format disk. $240 megabytes, yeah. Fast file system, put trash can, I'm just going to go quick format. This is already configured without changing the max transfer rate and things like that. So yeah, we now have a fresh, free disk. And you can already see that this bar here that shows how much of the disk is used is slightly different in this version. I think it was the same in 3.1.4 already. We're going to install the Workbench. And I'm going to use the English version, so just, yeah, there's several language versions. Usually I would do the German version because I'm in Germany and German is my first language. But for the purpose of this international video, we're going with English. And this should be pretty straightforward. We're just going to have to change the disk images according to what it's requesting from time to time. Oh, and it shows me an out-of-memory error. So I'm not able to install this on a stock Amiga 600. Out-of-memory error. Okay. Okay, so I continue to get this error message even after a fresh reboot, and then I just looked it up on the manufacturer's listing here, or at the Alinea computer shop I bought it from actually, and we need 2 megabytes of memory for installing this. Yeah. If we don't use a physical Kickstart ROM, we even need 2.5 megabytes of memory. So yeah, we pretty much can't install this on this stock Amiga 600. I need a memory expansion to do it. Okay, so something rather strange just happened. I remembered that I had a broken memory expansion for the A600 lying around, and when I first inserted it, it was actually turned out to be broken, so I thought this would turn into a memory expansion repair video. But I poked around with my oscilloscope, you can still see it running in the background there, and it started to spring to life. I have no idea why. Probably there's a pin that doesn't make good contact or something like that. Now we have 2 megabytes of RAM in this system. Yeah, this is the memory expansion in place here. And yeah, I went over this with the multimeter off camera at some point and checked all the connections because this had some severe battery leakage on it that got repaired by the previous owner of this. And it seemed like everything was connected correctly. And now poking around with the oscilloscope, all the RAM chips behaved like they're supposed to be, like with TTL levels on all the signal pins and things like that, and everything was getting power. So yeah, I wondered why this didn't work, but I think there may be a cracked solder joint somewhere. So what I'm going to do now, it works. At the moment we have 2 megabytes of RAM in the system displayed in Workbench, but what I'm going to do is to resolder all the connections, because probably what caused the fault in the first place was one of these joints not making good contact. So I'm just going to do that quickly, and probably, maybe we have a working extra 1 megabyte in the Amiga 600, which would be amazing, of course. Especially since I thought this wouldn't work at all. Yeah, this also has a coin cell instead of the barrel battery that leaked on it. So previous owner replaced that. And I officially reached the end of this spool of solder. But fortunately, I have more. I'm also going to spray some contact cleaner into the connector here. While I'm at it, I'm also going to print a label that's going to double as a UV protectant for our little UV erase window there. There we go. Yeah, that turned out to be quite an adventure, but I somehow got it to work reliably. I resoldered all the joints and put more solder in the vias. And then I ended up also replacing the electrolytic capacitors on here, cleaned the connector a couple of times, and now it seems to work for each startup. I hope it lasts, we're going to see. But now we have 2 megabytes chip RAM in here, and hopefully that is going to work for this purpose. So we could potentially be able to install Workbench 3.2 on here, which I'm going to try. Oh, it's working on installation, so maybe this time this program lets you install release 3.2 of the Amiga operating system on your hard drive and also deploy several associated optionals. Proceed. Install release 3.2. Yes. And they also integrated the installation of glow icons now, which was rather hidden in the previous 3.1.4. It was integrated, but it was hidden. Must confirm all actions. Let's just go with the novice user, I think. Now we installed on your hard drive, any previous release already present will be replaced. If applicable, certain files from previous releases will be reserved, including the startup sequence, which is a nice feature. So you can just upgrade, basically. Yes, Workbench partition. English language. Do you want to install glow icons? Make most sense on screens with 16 colors or more. They may consume more chip RAM. So I'm not going to install glow icons on this machine because it's rather under-specced at this point. I'm probably going to upgrade it at some point, but for now, we're not going to install glow icons. And as you've seen, we can do that later by running the installer again also. And we're actually copying files. It's already copying the libraries. So yeah, I'm just going to go through this installation process. We're going to have several disk changes. I think it's 5 or 6 different disks. And I'm just going to use my GoTech to select them and insert them virtually. And it's proceeding. Okay, this seems to work. I'm going to report back when I have something, when anything interesting happens. This is just basically copying files across, pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, so it's working beautifully. Of course, you can also buy this with a set of actual floppy disks. And there are various versions of this you can buy. You can also buy pre-made ROMs. Of course, I just went with the cheapest option, because, yeah, I don't have a lot of money and this is rather expensive. But, I mean, the work that went into it is clearly worth it. And also this version has the advantage over previous versions that you are allowed to actually install it on a number of machines from the files on the CD. Or if you get a number of ROMs, you have the license to install it in multiple machines, if you so desire. And that's great. And we managed to completely and successfully install Workbench 3.2. Remove all disks from floppy drives and reboot. Okay. And we should now boot into Workbench 3.2 if everything went well. Let's hope for the best. There we go. Yeah, okay. Successful first boot, and we still have our memory expansion working, which is what really bothers me the most at this point. Yeah. And this has some really cool new features that are, most of them are under the hood really, but there's so many cool features. I highly recommend checking out some videos that some friends of mine made. Amiga Bill at the Guru Meditation YouTube channel made a really cool little roundup of new features that he particularly likes in this new system. And also Doug from the 10-minute Amiga Retrocast channel made a really cool video going a bit deeper. And yeah, there's better videos than I would be able to do at this point, but Yeah, I just basically just want to check out how well this performs on this rather low-spec'd system. This is basically a stock Amiga 600 with just an added 1 megabyte chip RAM. This performs a bit slow on here, but it's absolutely usable. I'm just going to set this to Deutschland. It looks very similar to the previous Workbench versions, of course. As I said, I'm not going to install the glow icons stuff on here or anything like that because, frankly, this system won't be capable of really handling that well. Probably going to put an accelerator in here at some point. One of the features is that it also supports scroll wheels now on if you have a USB adapter on a mouse, you can actually use the scroll wheel from the get-go. This also has built-in support for mounting ADF disk files right from the get-go, which is awesome. And yeah, there's so many, as I said, there's so many little improvements. There's a lot of bug fixes. You can set this so that the windows can actually be dragged off screen, which makes this more like a modern operating system. The resizable from all sides is also a cool feature that makes this look more Windows resizing from all corners, only takes effect on new windows. Okay. So yeah, we can basically resize the windows from each side as in modern operating systems, which is pretty cool. It's pretty intuitive if you are coming from something like Windows or macOS or something like that. Ah, there's finally a proper text editor that you can just... Oh, okay. That's pretty nifty. Nice. And this has a number of new file types, right, integrated right into the system. You can play audio files of all kinds right from the Workbench. You can display all kinds of modern graphics formats and things like that. That's pretty cool. I really like it. And it runs reasonably well. I don't think this runs any slower in this configuration without any bells and whistles. It doesn't really run any slower than Workbench 3.1 would run on this system, I think. Which is a pretty amazing thing in itself. This is an amazing feature. There's a very huge help built right into the system, which is basically a whole manual for the system. Yeah, there's so many things you can read up on here. Yeah, this is a whole. The help system is massively improved. The installer that comes with this is more compatible with earlier versions of the installers, so we shouldn't run into many issues. One thing, as I pointed out earlier, there are several libraries missing. So some of your old Workbench-centered disks won't work with this. I think there are workarounds for it to integrate them into the ROM, actually, those libraries, but in this configuration, this is probably made for slightly upgraded Amiga systems that have more memory and probably a CF card or an SD card or a larger hard disk drive, which should also work very well on these systems. Yeah, so it runs reasonably well. I'm pretty happy that my memory expansion held up until now. And yeah, installation went really smoothly. There's not much that's new about it. The installer seems to work fine and looks a lot like the previous versions of the AmigaOS installers. And yeah, this is clearly meant to be used on slightly upgraded machines. The fact alone that it only runs with 2 megabytes and upwards of chip memory is an indication of that. This is aimed to be used with larger hard disks, which work a lot better and without any hassle. In this version, you don't even have to change the max transfer rate and things like that. And this should also support really large hard disk partitions now without any issues. This is a, I think, 256 megabyte SD card I'm using here because that was enough for the system. Maybe I'm going to put a larger one in there at some point and try that. As I said, I'm going to put an accelerator card in here at some point, and then maybe we are going to be able to use the glow icons. I'm not even going to try that because in this basic configuration it runs reasonably well. It's a bit sluggish at some points, but that's because this is not accelerated in any way. This has just the standard Motorola 68K processor in there and barely enough RAM to even install this. So yeah, it is working fine. And there are many changes to the system. I think it's well worth your money if you want to upgrade to this. Hats off to the programmers who are still working on improving the Amiga experience and making it translate into the 21st century, which is amazing. Who would have thought that this would be a thing in 2021? I certainly didn't. I always thought there would be couple of enthusiasts still tinkering with these old systems, but I had no idea that there would be new software everywhere and that it would be commercially available and people would actually buy and use it and use the Amigas still as a productive kind of machine. Pretty amazing. So yeah, I think that's a wrap for today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon or on the channel memberships page. Thanks for your subscriptions. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for giving me thumbs up and things like that. Yeah, I'm going to play with this for a while and probably there's going to be more videos. I also plan to update my Amiga 1200, which is a more capable machine that has an accelerator in it that should run the glow icon stuff and higher resolutions on Workbench, more colors and things like that without any issues. I'm going to make that a separate video. I think this was more about fixing the RGBtoHDMI mod and installing 3.2 in it in the first place. So yeah, hope this was informative. I'm Jan Beta. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye!